We're here on the BrightHR page today, and we're having a look at the rostering function. On your left navigation panel, you're going to head to rosters and shifts. Through here, we're going to be able to create new rosters. We're going to be able to view old rosters, existing shifts, and have a look at our roster settings. We're going to start with our roster settings today. And you'll see first up that it will allow you to choose your default roster view. Currently with our rostering, we have 3 views you can choose from. The table view is going to give you sort of all your bells and whistles. There's color coding. It's very visual and is what we'll mainly be looking at today. The timeline view is very static. I'll show you that today as well. And the drag and drop view is sort of a view in between timeline to table. So we'll have a look at that as well. Just underneath, we'll have a couple of settings that we can tweak. We have things in regards to restricted roster permissions. Having this enabled is going to mean that you can allocate specific managers to create or edit that roster and that roster alone. If you have this disabled, it means managers and admins can jump in between any ongoing rosters that you may have on the system. So if you do have sort of different teams or different sections within the business that require a roster, and you have manager A looking after team A's roster and there's no interaction between team A and team B, you may want this one enabled just so that they can't accidentally click into the wrong roster and update and edit the wrong roster. We also have the ability to hide shift labels in rosters from the employees. Now, this will make a little bit more sense as we go into the roster and create our roster, but we are going to be able to apply color codes and labels to our rosters. If we're going to use these color codes and labels for something a bit more sensitive, potentially for things like pay rates or the type of shift, if you don't want your team to know that, or other team members to see each other's shifts, we can enable this one in that case. We also have the ability to switch on or off the accept and decline shifts option. Now, this can only be switched off for permanent staff. It will automatically be assigned to those that are added into the system as a casual employee. What you'll see when we select eligible employees is that those that are casual workers cannot be deselected, but you can go in and add or I guess remove permanent staff members from accepting and declining their shifts. And at the very bottom, we have the activating of open shifts. Now, open shifts we're going to have a look at today as well is if you're needing to put a shift out to your team to claim, maybe you have a last minute shift tomorrow that you need somebody to fill and you want to send it out to a couple of people to sort of first come, first serve and choose that shift that they would like to take, we can have this enabled. So for today's showing of the rosters, I will show the open shifts. So we're going to have this one enabled as well. All right, we're going to go straight to creating a roster. So when we head to create a roster, we will have 2 prompts. We can either create a new roster completely, or if you've already been on the system creating rosters, you might want to use the copy an existing roster, particularly if you do have routine elements to what you do or what the staff do. Even if it's things like you have a week A, week B schedule, I will show you when we create the roster how this function will make things a lot easier. For today, we're going to create one from scratch. So we're going to click create a new roster. We're going to input a name for the roster. So we might end up doing, I usually do week commencing. So we'll do week commencing April 22nd, I believe, will be from the Monday. Perfect. Our roster duration, it is default to 7 days. You've got sort of anything between 4 to 14 days, as well as a calendar month. One thing I do want to point out is if you are doing the calendar month option, and I'll just select it to show you, you won't be able to use the copy a roster function with this because the calendar months are obviously different month on month, the copying feature isn't going to function with this. However, if you do want a month-long roster and then or like a 4-week roster and then want to mimic that for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to show you how you can achieve that by using a 7-day roster. So we'll just choose the start date again. We can section off this roster to be with all employees or by teams. So once you've added your staff into the system, if you then want to create teams, this will help in terms of structure, as well as the ability to assign the correct staff to the correct roster. For today, I am going to use all because I will show you how you can still see the teams, even if you're choosing all staff. We then have our 3 views. So the table view is what we're going to start with today. We're going to click create your roster. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be asked, who do we want to add onto this roster? So even though I said all employees, you can still see my sectioning with the teams and the ability up top as well to search by name or group, which is your teams. I'm going to choose a couple of employees today just to add on to this roster, and we'll click Add Employees. What you'll see is the employee names along the left-hand side and the days of the week across the top of the table. This is really about lining up our columns and rows to start assigning shifts, especially those shifts that are sort of guaranteed. You know that you need to give me a shift on the Monday. You know that Michelle needs a shift on the Tuesday. That's what we're going to use with these white boxes here. Now, what you might notice is we have the prompt here of absent. This is tying into the other component of the BrightHR system, which is our absent section. If leave requests or unavailability have been put in through the employee's profile, they will then reflect through here so you know that you're not able to give me a shift on that Tuesday and Wednesday because you've already approved her to be off on those days. However, we have all these other boxes that we can fill with shifts. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that we want to give Michelle a shift on the 22nd of April, the Monday. We're going to line up her name and that day of the week and click into the white box here, and it will give us a pop-up where we can start to adjust start and finish times. So I'm going to move this around so you can have a look. There's a sort of the drop-down menu. We'll click the apply button to make sure it saves into place, or you can also type it in on your end too using your keyboard. The break duration, whenever you're seeing breaks on our system, it is in reference to the unpaid break. And then we have our notes section. Now, the notes section is important for anything we need to detail about this particular shift to the employee. So it could be things like locations, it could be tasks, it could be contact details, anything they need to know about this shift, you would add into the notes section because that employee will be able to read that. We then have the color code and label that we sort of mentioned at the start. So the color code, again, if you've hidden the label from the staff members, from the employees, then this will be a little bit more for your reference point. But if you're using it and making it visible to them, then they will also be able to see the label. So what we want to use the color code and label for is identifying maybe the type of shift. You may already use color coding in your rosters if you've been doing them sort of for an Excel or by sort of manual paper rosters. Maybe you've already got a color code scheme in place. You're going to be able to apply it here. If you're not using color code at the moment, a couple of ideas, depending on different industries, obviously it will differ, but let's say you're in a hospitality industry, you might use the color code and label to reference a front of house or back of house shift. If you're in something like an office space, maybe it's a room number, or maybe it's a work from home day or payroll day. If you're in sort of, again, like a medical or even like a childcare kind of industry, maybe it's room numbers or certain names for the room. groups. In an NDIS field, it could be things like the type of care, if it's a respite, if it's an overnight or sleepover shift, highlighting that. Because what we're going to do, I'm going to put in an example here. So let's say that this was a office day or whatnot. We have a few field staff members and they're coming into the office whenever they have that pink color code on a shift. I'll type it in as such. We're going to click add shift. This is going to add into the roster on that Monday date. And you can see the color code very visually underneath. And when we hover over the little paper icon, you'll also see the notes that we've left there. So you get a bit of an overview and the office label. So you can use that color code for anything that at a glance, you know, Monday, you need 3 people in the office, for example. You can see here very clearly that you've only got 1 office shift, 1 pink shift. We still need to assign 2 other shifts to fulfill 3 people in the office on that day. So you can use the color code to represent something like that. Now, we've created 1 shift, and maybe that's a consistent shift. Maybe that's something that every day we need somebody doing that shift. It might not always be Michelle that does that shift, but we do need it filled. We're not going to necessarily need to go in and click in and create all that detail again. What I'm going to show you is on the top left of your page, you will have the button that says Add Manage Shifts. In here, you're basically creating a bit of a library. Any shifts you've added will be available in the drop-down. You'll be able to select it from the list. It will then be on your cursor. So as you hover over the table, you will see the prompt, basically to click and assign that shift. If we no longer need that shift, we can close out of it and we could go through and we could add in a different shift, whether through the pink button up top here and the Add New Shift button, or whether clicking onto the actual table and selecting the date. Either way, so I'll do another one to show you. So we'll put in here again a couple of notes. Maybe this is a green shift, maybe this is a work from home. So I'll just initialize it, work from home, add shift, and you'll see that add in to that Tuesday date. So that now you can get a bit of an idea of how the color coding can help in representing that. And if we click again to the top left here, our library has now updated to include our work from home shift. So what you can do, particularly for those of you that have set shifts that need filling, maybe again, the people doing them will change, but there's always a 9 to 5 shift or a morning shift, an afternoon shift. You can create the roster with all the shifts you need, remembering that you then have that copy function. So then you could copy that templated roster you're creating to then apply or sort of choose from your drop down and sort of plug and play where you need to assign those shifts as well. It makes it very a lot easier because we're creating the library of shifts. If we've got this roster set up as we do here and we decided, hey, we actually want this to move from a week to a fortnight, then what we have is on the top here, we have the duration button. In here, it will give us the prompt to add an additional week or to copy shifts to a new week as well. So add a week can be a blank week. So if you had week A, week B, you might do add week and add a blank one to create that B schedule. But if this week and next week are the exact same, you could use the copy shifts to a new roster or to an existing roster and copy all the same shifts, copy all the same notes, copy all the same open shifts. If that's right, then we click copy week. And what you'll see is it will have added on to this roster. So you can now see the Monday, the 29th of April, and it's mimicked it across. Again, it's going to flag anything if there were overlaps. So as we had the absent side here, if you see it hovering over as orange, if there was a conflict here where we had duplicated this week into next and somebody had leave on one of these days that a shift was assigned, it would be flagged in orange to prompt you to know that, hey, there's something that needs amending here. Perfect. So this section here is all of our key, I guess, day-to-day shifts, the guaranteed shifts. However, along the top, we do have our open shifts tab. So what we're going to do is have a look at how we can allocate open shifts. I'm going to close this shift at the top here. Now, open shifts means we don't really know who's going to take this shift. We want to put it out to the team. So we also know that we have a certain day that we need filled, and we want to put it out to the team to claim who would like to work that day. Maybe we have an overtime shift on a Sunday that we need to put out to the team. We're going to click into this field here, and it's going to give us the option to select a shift we've already created or create a new one just below. I'm going to choose one from the list above. The only added thing that it will ask us is for the number of shifts. How many of these shifts do we need filled? Let's say it's just the one. When we click next, we're going to get the pop-up here to say, okay, who do we want to send this out to claim and say, I would like to take this shift. Now, at the moment, we could select all employees. If one of these employees had a conflict, as in they were already scheduled on a shift during that time, or they had an absence during that time, if it's inputted on our system, it will tell you that they're again in an orange prompt that there was a conflict. Looks like there's no conflicts here, so we can actually put it out to each of these team members to claim, update that, review our summary, and confirm that into place. That's now going to sit up the top in our open shift section, one unclaimed. We can click on the little info bubble to double check what we inputted or edit if we need. We can also continue to add more for that day should we need to as well. Now, the main thing with all of this is still all in a draft stage. Your staff will not be seeing anything regarding the roster, their shifts, their open shifts until you hit the publish button on the top right. So we can click the publish button on the top right, hit publish roster. That is what is going to send the notification across to their BrightHR mobile apps. So it is really important that your team have the BrightHR app downloaded if you are looking to use the rostering functionality. What that's going to do is send notification to their apps to say, these are your shifts for the week. Anyone who is a casual employee or who is a permanent employee that you've assigned the ability to accept and decline shifts, and you'll be able to identify that with the P for pending. Anybody with the P for pending is either a casual employee or someone you've assigned the ability to accept and decline shifts. They will also get that notification, but they will have the prompt to accept or decline that shift in line with legislation for the casual employee. So legislatively, they have the option to accept or decline the shifts. And then for the permanent staff, it's more there as a reference point for you if you'd like to apply that. The same with the open shifts. The open shifts only go out when we click publish. They now get a notification to say, hey, there's an additional shift on Sunday. Here's the notes about it. If you'd like to claim this shift, feel free. And it's a first come, first serve. Once it is claimed, it will then move into whoever has accepted that role. What we're going to do is we're just going to have a quick touch on the timeline and drag and drop view, just so you're aware of what those views look like. We'll head to the timeline view first. This is I guess, the initial way that we had rosters. So rosters has come quite a far way since we started. This is the timeline view. It's very day by day. So if you have a shift that happens on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you're going to need to input it each time individually. So you'd click add shift, you put in a start time, the finish time. Similar in terms of the layout, choosing an employee as well. And then you will go through and confirm that into place and add that. It's just very static, step by step. You don't have the color coding or the labeling through here. But I will say you can create a shift through the table view like we did and view it on the timeline view if that's something you prefer. What I find people generally lean towards looking at the timeline view for is, let's say this shift for Ryan we needed to edit. We can click into it. We can adjust the start and finish times. I'm actually going to put this as like an overnight shift because that's what I find the timeline view is generally good to be using for. So let's say that this was from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. the next day. It's an overnight sort of shift or an on-call shift or something like that. We would update that shift. And what you'll see is it displays from one end to the other. So it shows the end of the Monday into the start of Tuesday. So that's what I find most people will use the timeline view for, even if it's setting it up from the table view, but then visually seeing that you've set it all up correct for the timeline view. That is one option through here. You still have the options to add week and copy shifts. It's just a little bit more static. We'll do the same by having a look at the drag and drop view. This is kind of the midpoint, so we can move, we're slowly making our transition across to the table view through here. In this sense, we have columns for the shift times, and then our days of the week here along the left, our employees along the right-hand side. So if we're wanting to apply a shift to an employee, we pick them up from the right-hand side and drag them and drop them into the roster. And you'll see them sit in through there and all the different shifts that we've got added in. The P for pending is there again. We have the add week and the copy shifts option, and we can go through to the different views as well. The table view is going to be the best visually. I would encourage you to trial using the table view first and foremost. Use those little tips and tricks of clicking into the actual cells here or the boxes, but then also accessing your library with the different shifts we've added in through here as well. If you're needing to add 2 shifts in one day, maybe you do split shifts for an employee, for example, you're able to do that as well. So what you would do is click into the day and the employee where they've already got a shift set up maybe. Clicking into it, we have the option to add shift. Going through, we could add in that this was maybe an additional meeting they needed to pick up for overtime or whatnot, and we can input that in here and apply a color code as well. Maybe it's an out of hours meeting. Initialize as that and add shift. What you're going to see is it tee up 2 shifts in the one cell. The color code, you can see the 2 color codes, and when you hover over it, you'll see the notes that we've left as well. So you can see that information there. Now, the key difference here between, I guess, having a roster published or unpublished. So we published the roster briefly just before. You can see I can make all these updates and edits. I don't have to unpublish and then republish to send these notifications out. You'll publish the roster when you're ready and you've set up the majority of what you know that week or fortnight or however long you're making the roster to be. Once you publish the roster, any changes you make, like at the addition of this shift or the addition of Ashley into this roster, those notifications are immediate. They're immediately going through to the employee's BrightHR mobile app. So that's the only difference you need to keep in mind, is that they'll immediately go through to the employee's app. If you're adding or if you're removing a shift as well, they automatically get a notification to tell them, hey, your shift is no longer needed on the Monday or whatnot. And you can do that by simply clicking into it, clicking the delete option and removing from here. Perfect. And so you can come back and forth and work from the roster as you would like. I'm going to head back to the rosters here on the left-hand panel just to show you that as you go, it will save. There's no save button. It just automatically is saving and updating as you go. If you have them unpublished, you'll see it in the below. If you have published them, you'll see them up top. Anything that is an older roster, you can still access and reference and copy. It's just under the old rosters heading. So you can see a list of all my old rosters through there. And under shifts, you'll see all the different shifts we've allocated and a bit of an overview. This is what it looks like more so from the app view, a bit more of a list and with the color coding and whatnot there. And if an employee has accepted or if it's still pending, open shifts and whatnot. Just finally here with the active rosters, one thing to keep in mind is that you can have the rosters going. So you could actually have the next week's commencing or fortnight commencing ready to go in the unpublished rosters, and then just publishing them when you're ready to alert them to the staff. You'll have the 3 dots here to do a lot of those updates and edits. So whether it's editing a roster, whether it's copying or setting up those permissions we talked about at the start, you can do that all through here. And make those relevant tweaks as well. Perfect. All the information you put into the roster is that scheduled. It's what you're communicating to the staff. You can also download the roster reports. This will allow you to download the information of what you've scheduled in a CSV file. So who's worked what, how many hours they've worked. You'll also have a breakdown in the actual roster itself. So I'll just click back into it. You may have noticed on the right-hand side, you've got a breakdown of the total hours, including the breaks, and you can uncheck that to see if they're unpaid breaks as well. You'll also have the summary option up top here. So if you're looking for a bit of an overview of what you've assigned and how many hours you've assigned for each employee within the actual roster, you can see that through here as well. And you've got the option of changing the weeks over. Perfect. The last thing I wanted to mention is actually over in the settings section. So we're going to make a jump across to settings. And you're going to see here in your company-wide settings, your employee settings option and the option to hide employees. If you have this enabled, it means your staff will not be able to see each other's roster. They won't be able to see the shifts for where Mia is on Monday or Tuesday or whatnot, or if they're working the same shift. That keeps it sensitive that the employee will only see their own shift. So if you do have that as a concern, make sure you're heading into the settings section and enabling the hide employees so they don't have the ability to see each other's rosters. If it's something that you do need them to see each other's rosters or there's no sort of, I guess, issue with that, then you can have this as disabled and then make sure you're updating that into place as well. Perfect. Heading back to rosters, that's the overview that I wanted to give for today. Use your rosters to your advantage. It is very visual. You are able to use the different views to accommodate to what you prefer, but hopefully that's given you a few hints and tricks on how you can be using the rosters function on the BrightHR system.